Creating jobs. So this is what is happening in the economy. Now, you hear me talk about the decline that has happened in stay-over tourism, the people who stay in hotels and guest houses. Well, here's what has happened now. Even in that situation, where the government really should be helping these people to rebound, this year in October, the government has introduced a tax on hotels, $8 per room per night. On anybody who goes to stay in a hotel, a guest house, $8 per room per night. They say, oh, it doesn't matter the money coming from the foreigners, but it don't matter. That's not true. If you go from Kingston down to Union Island and stay in a place, a guest house for 2 or 3 days, you still have to pay it as a local, because the person who, under the legislation, would pay it is somebody who stays up to 30 days. That is considered to be a temporary visitor. But here, the kind of reverse common sense, that means stupidity. The longer you stay, is the more you pay. Because it's $8 per room per night. So if you pay 1 night, you pay $8. 10 nights, you're paying $80. What message that sends to a visitor? Eh? And I raised this with them. I said, it doesn't make sense. If you have to do it, make a flat fee. You don't discourage people from staying longer by charging them a tax every night. But that is the circumstance that we meet now in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I have called on the Hotel Association and the hotel operators, stand up. It's your livelihood that's being threatened. Talk out. Now the government says they're going to build a 250-room hotel down in Montwin. With money they're going to borrow from the Taiwanese. We don't know yet what the terms are. $50 million. This will add an additional $132 million to the national debt. But the thing that concerns me is this. Why is it, even in Tobago, you hear Sandals is investing in a new hotel there. In Grenada, you have private sector investment in hotels. In St. Lucia, you have Sandals opening up or expanding. Why is it that we can't attract private capital to do these kinds of development? We have a development in Buckerman Bay Resort. Many of you know it. At the time, it was trumped as this great thing that was going to happen, that was going to be twinned with the Argyle International Airport to make it all viable. For 2 years, it's been like a beached whale down at Buckerman Bay. Not a single soul is employed except maybe security guards, because it closed. And the reason was that it was never designed and built as a viable hotel to operate. If you look at the case, it was a case that was filed in the court in the UK. I think it was heard in, the judgment came down in 2015. And Justice Colson in that decision said that the resort was built like a Ponzi scheme. It was just to collect money from people to invest in it. And it kept expanding because it kept getting more investments. So it started out initially as a 21-room development. By the time they finished, they had committed over 1,800. And only 19 people got actual rooms. So it was a vehicle to make money, not to run as a tourism. So it wasn't surprising that it went belly up eventually. And we as a country, we had to give concessions. Our reputation is affected because they see that we are allowing swindlers, basically, to come and do developments in St. Vincent. And now we have a situation where the government doesn't seem able to attract private investors to build a hotel at Montwin. Now, I do believe that you must increase room capacity on the mainland. You have to make Argyle more viable, the Argyle International Airport. We talk about some of the differences. You've heard us mention We have very serious concerns about the lack of accountability with the building of that airport. Over $1 billion of public funds and not a single accounting record has been presented to the Parliament. When we asked the question about it, we were told to go to the Commercial and Intellectual Property Office to look for the information. I am not Sherlock Holmes. I'm a member of Parliament. When money is voted by Parliament, you're supposed to bring it to the Parliament to account for it. That is what our Constitution says. It wasn't done. And it was set up deliberately in that way so that they would not come to Parliament, because they established what are essentially private companies owned by the government, and then say that private companies don't have to come to the Parliament. Utter nonsense, because these are public funds. So we are in a very difficult situation. The Buckingham Bay Resort, I want to see it open because I want the jobs. I want the promises that were made. I want people to get work. I want the people who were the suppliers, the truck operators who provided services during the construction. And when they complained, they were told by ministers of government, if you have a beef, don't go to the developer, come to me. And now they are left also holding the bag. We are told that Vincent was owed $7 million. So I want to see it open. And when I asked the question in the Parliament of the Prime Minister, why do you expect that it will open in December? He said, what did he say? He said he will be disappointed if it's not open in December. So naturally, I had a follow-up, which is a logical follow-up. If you are disappointed, does that mean that you're going to expect it to open in December? Because you can't be disappointed unless you have an expectation. That's logic. It's like 2 and 2. So he said, I don't give my answer. I don't have to explain any further. The point is that today, it is not open. And there is no prospect of it opening, certainly not in December. And we have no word of it opening anytime soon, because they're looking for investors. And so, this promise again has not been realized. There's a lot of talk that happened around the time when it was going on. A lot of promises, a lot of bragging, you know, and the use of words again to bamboozle people that you don't know what you're talking about. I am the only person. I know engineering, I know medicine, I know business, I know law, I know everything. And then we come to a situation that I have described here, where the economy of our country is struggling. And that is not a joke. Every Monday morning, some of the business seems to be closing down. People can't pay their rent, they can't pay their workers. In truth, we don't have an economy, a viable economy in St. Vincent, and everything turns upon that. You can't put bandages in the hospital. You can't fix the potholes in the road. You can't pay for the book loan scheme. You can't help parents when their children have to go to school and they can't. You know how painful that is? You can't find lunch and you kept your kid home because you can't provide them with lunch. These are things that are basic to the obligations of government. And they're failing our people. This is why we must have a change. We must bring about a change in this country. This is why I need your help. Government, you know, it's not a sprint. It's a relay. There's somebody who runs their leg, and if you want to run the second leg, you will lose the race. Ralph run his leg, however good, badly. He's run his leg. It's time for the baton to be taken over by someone else. I have offered myself, and I believe the first thing you need to be a good leader is to listen to the people you're representing. I can't represent somebody if I don't know what they want. This is why when I became the leader of the party, I decided I was going to travel the whole country and meet the people in their communities. They made a joke of it. They say, oh, look, Friday, come from Bedford, you don't know tongue. He go travel the whole of the mainland. So I said, well, that's fine. If you don't want to go, I will go. I will go and meet the people. I went Fancy, Owia, Chateau-Belair, several times, Leyu, Diamonds, everywhere. And the insights that I got, the way that the people related to us, because here is a novel idea. The people we elect are coming to us to find out what we want. And I promise them that I'm doing it now. Election is in call. I have met people who are Labour supporters. And they come to me, Mr. Friday, I'm not on your side, but I like what you're doing, you know, because no election in call yet. And you're here. And of course, I encourage them to support us because we want to bring about the change. We can't do it without them. And for those of us who are supporters, I say to them, embrace, love, these are your fellow Vincentians. We are one nation, one people, one Vinci. You can't change government unless you change minds. You know? And the way in which we do it is to show our common humanity. That we love people, we want to serve and help people. We want to share for one another. And when we succeed, all of us succeed. You don't have to chop the other person down to make yourself look better. You should relish in everybody's success, everybody's talent, everybody's gifts. We've all been endowed differently by the Creator. Who are we to pick and choose and to put down and to pull down, when in fact we're all part of one fabric? One human fabric, the larger one, and certainly one Vinci fabric. So, that is the approach that we will adopt. I promise you that. Because this is not a gimmick. It is a way of being. My ambition for the people of this country, I believe that Vincentians, as I said at the outset, we can change, we can form, we can build our own destiny. Whatever we do in terms of projects, we have to start off with the proposition, how is that going to help the people in the community where we put it? If you're going to spend $30 million to build a fisheries complex, as was done in Oria, you have to ask yourself, how is that going to integrate with the community in Oria? The fishermen? Or who else? You don't put it there and then you try to force people buying conchs all the way from Union Island to go and process them in Oria. You know, and why was it done? It was a cynical political trick. Because it was put there because they figure North Leeward is vulnerable. Let's put it in Oria and tell the people this is something that is going to benefit them. You know, it's like a shiny object. It puts you there, it dazzles you. By the time you take your eye off it, election over. That is what they do. But it's even more cruel than that. I liken it to somebody, you find somebody in a desert and they're thirsty. You said, here's a glass of water, but you put it somewhere up there where they can't reach it. That is what was done to the people of Oria. The people of North Windward. Go check it out for yourself. The fences are falling down. Rotting down. At one time, electricity was cut off in the building because they had no use for it. It cost $33 million to build and created not a single job. Because it was never intended to benefit the people of the community. It was intended to win an election. And so I say that in order for us to go forward, we are a small country, limited resources. Our most precious resources between our ears. Our people, our intellect, our commitment, our resources. That is what we have. We don't have oil and gold and iron ore. We have people who love our country. So whatever we do, we have to make sure that it magnifies them, it gives them opportunities. Otherwise, there's no point. That's not development. Development is about people. It's not about buildings. That's the approach I'm going to adopt. If you could build a big facility that's going to cost $60 million, and I could do something else for $2 million and get the same result, why would I build a $60 million one? Because it look good? So I can stand up and say, look what I did. Do you know that the Argyle International Airport's been open for a year? I talked about the tourism figures. In 2018, stay-over visitors figures are actually down, not up. I'll put on my glasses. This is just showing you what the importance is of proper economic planning. You check the figures, you will see that in 2018 up to June this year, that the stay-over arrivals are down as compared to what they were the same time last year. And that is with the effect of the Argyle International Airport. Now, what makes a good life for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines? That's all we're trying to do. How we make things better. How do you make things better? Don't complicate it. How do you make things better for the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines? And right now we have the situation with crime, the fear of violence, that is making life miserable for most of our people. You heard my colleagues talk about the fear, and they tell us it's because Friday scaremongering, Bacchus scaremongering, that it's not real. Let me read something for you from the Vincentian newspaper, September 28. It says this. They were quoting a resident of Lodge Village who says that everybody in the area is locking down early. This is a quote from the Vincentian. We are having to live in constant fear. It is a scary thing about the robberies. But he says, thank God, at least the people didn't come from Lodge Village. But the point is, we are not making this up. We had to walk. We are talking about crime and violence in the country. Everybody is feeling it. Everybody's telling us in our constituencies. You hear people from abroad telling, oh boy, I was thinking of coming home, but I don't hear all these killings and so on. I don't feel like coming anymore. Still, the government, especially Ralph Gonsalves, it's not a big deal. We're just making it up. We're frightening people. We walked from Fitzhugh to Kingston and from Rebecca to Kingston. Not because it was easy. We did it to try to dramatize this issue of crime and violence, to make people talk about it, put it front and center, so that the government had to respond to it. And the same with joblessness, especially for young people. The IMF says 46% of the young people in St. Vincent are unemployed. International Monetary Fund figures from 2017. It's more than that. So, we have that situation where people are afraid daily. Last night, we hear again the litany of woe that comes out of our country. That a shooting in Paul's Avenue, where 4 persons were shot. 1 fatally. But in that incident, from the description you hear, it could have been all 4 of them dead. The nature of this violence is scaring the hell out of everybody in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, except obviously the Prime Minister. Because he has protection. He's been so long behind the high walls of protection that he's lost touch with what the common person in the country actually feels. Completely out of touch. But we will continue to raise these matters on behalf of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Rape and sexual violence are endemic in St. Vincent. We are on the top of the list. I am so disgusted every time I hear of an incident or some statistic that comes out. It's always St. Vincent and the Grenadines doing something bad. We don't lead in economic indices. We don't lead in educational accomplishments. We lead in rape, violence, gun violence, sexual assaults. And I saw this weekend on the front page of the newspaper an allegation against the Commissioner of Police, the acting Commissioner of Police, by another police officer alleging sexual assault against that officer. That same acting Commissioner of Police had allegations made against him in court recently of abusing an inmate. When these things are front page news, how do you feel as fellow Vincentians? How do you feel out here? One day I stepped off the plane in Barbados going somewhere. A professional, I don't know where he's from, but he knew who I was. And as we went into the airport, it was in Barbados, it was Trinidad, he said to me, he said, "Friday, what is happening in St. Vincent?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The country seemed to be gone crazy." So I thought, well, maybe he's a Vincentian. So I asked him, well, where is he from and so on. Then he told me, I think he was from Antigua. How does a professional in Antigua take an interest in what is happening in St. Vincent? Because they hear what is happening in St. Vincent. So this matter of the sexual assault allegation against the commissioner, the acting commissioner of police, requires that the commissioner of police step down. I am saying that in this situation you can't be at the head of a force that is supposed to investigate an offense of that nature while you are there. So if there's merit in the allegation, then the commissioner has a duty to step aside until the matter is investigated. And if he doesn't, the Minister of National Security has a duty to the nation to ask him to step aside. Now, I know you want to ask me some questions, and some of you might have some tough ones lined up. But that's okay. I just want to touch on something that Sister Kim mentioned. Give me 5 minutes. She talked about the problems or the interest that we have taken in this matter of accountability, or a lack of accountability in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I've written to the Prime Minister about it. I've had public press conferences about it. We've written in the newspaper. We've talked about it on our platforms. And the reason why we do it is because we have a law that was put in place when our Constitution was given or negotiated in 1979, which outlines that any funds that are taken, voted by Parliament, and spent, as Kay read it out, basically you have to come back to Parliament to account for it. She's explained that. That is not being done. The law is not being followed. Every year there is a report to the director about it that is supposed to be laid in the Parliament by the Minister of Finance, and then the Public Accounts Committee is supposed to examine that report. I, as the Leader of the Opposition, am the Chair of the Public Accounts Committee. But it's very ineffective for you to go and question or interrogate a report that is 8 years, 7 years old, because the things they're talking about, they happened long gone. You know, any kind of effectiveness you can have to make remedial changes is totally nullified by the fact that the report is so late and out of date. So we have called on the Minister of Finance to provide the necessary resources to the Director of Audit so that the reports can be done up to date. And not only that, that important public projects like the Argyle International Airport can be audited properly and your money can be accounted for. I mean, it is outrageous in this day and age, in a country that calls itself a democracy, to say that you would spend over $1 billion of public funds and you don't have to provide an audited account of how those funds were spent. That the Director of Audit, who under the Constitution has the duty to say how public funds were spent and to send that report back to the Parliament so that we can then interrogate that report, that she does, well, he or she does not have the means to do it. Now that is something that we must change. But there is another aspect of it. Our Constitution also says that the public funds, any money that you collect, must go into the consolidated fund. I'll read what it says. Section 68 of our Constitution. It's important that you know some of these things. Because when we talk, we can't just talk about how we feel. We have to talk from being informed. That is what is required of citizens in a modern democracy. We can't be lazy about it. We have to go and do our work as well. So Section 68 of our Constitution says, all revenues or other monies raised or received by St. Vincent, not being revenues or other monies that are payable by or under any law for the time being enforced in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, into some other established special purpose fund, shall be paid into and form a consolidated fund. Essentially what it is saying is that any money you collect on behalf of St. Vincent and the Grenadines must go into the consolidated fund unless Parliament creates, by an act of Parliament, a special fund for which you can put that money in for a special purpose. The Petrocurry program started in 2005. You heard Brother Leacock talk about it. It was a scheme that was set up for political reasons by Hugo Chavez, Venezuela. You import oil from Venezuela. By that time, high prices were high, $100 a barrel. You pay them $40 and you get to keep the $60 essentially as a loan. And the government can use that for social purposes. Hundreds of millions of dollars, we say, were collected under that fund between 2005 and 2016. That money was never put into the consolidated fund. No law had been passed in Parliament to create a special fund to put it in. All right? Remember, the law requires, if you collect money on behalf of the government, you must put it in the consolidated fund. And the Accountant General is the person who's responsible for writing the checks and receiving the checks and so on to put the money there. That wasn't done, and no law was created to put a special fund. Leacock told you that he spoke about it in the Parliament. And what happened? In 2016, the government finally came, they brought in a law called the Petrocurry Special Fund Act that gives the government the authority to put the money collected under the fund into an account set up under that act. But what it says as well, in the miscellaneous clause towards the end of the legislation, is that anything that they did in the past 14 years, how much? Yes, was lawful. So long as it's not outright fraud. That they spent the money, it was properly spent. And the reason why they do that is because they had no authority to spend it in the first place. So in order to sanitize what they had done, they made it retroactive. And so they never came to the Parliament and say, this is how much we got this year out of the Petrocurry Fund, this is how we're going to spend it. In fact, when we asked the questions, it was as though it was none of our business, because Ralph and Chavez were friends and they negotiated this thing, so they talk about unsigned the agreement, so we want to know how much money we collect for. The reason we want to know is because it's our duty as members of Parliament and as citizens of this country. And that fund, the money that we got is not a grant, it's a loan. You have to pay it back. And you have to pay 2% interest on the money. So now it has become part of the national debt. And so we all have to pay it back. And this is what has passed for good governance under this administration. And we have to know how those monies were spent. We don't still. We do not. Because that fund as well was set up under private acts under the Commercial and Intellectual Property Office, and they were never audited by the Director of Audit. Now the law says that the Director of Audit is entitled to audit the accounts of the petrochemical companies. So I asked the question, well, does this mean then that she can go backwards to 2015 and then come up to date? And they said, no, it's prospective. You have to go forward now. You audit going forward, not going back. And all the money done gone, you know. We don't receive a single shipment of oil nowadays on the Petrocarib. I asked that in the Parliament the other day. The Prime Minister danced all around the bush. And came back to the end and say that because they can't organize the shipping, that we're not getting any oil. So that means that the fund, basically, we're not making any money from it anymore. So that is reality of what is happening in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And it is our duty as our citizens to deal with them in a constructive way. Now, my friends, we cannot continue to operate our country as if anything goes. We can and must do better. Some of the problems I've outlined can be fixed merely by following the law, which is what we said about accountability. The structure is already there. If you follow the law, you solve that problem. Other problems require us as Vincentians to change our expectations of government, of political leaders, and of one another. In short, we must raise our game. We must believe in ourselves that we can do better and then act accordingly. Faith without action that's biblical. So we can't keep doing the same old things in the same old way. The things that got us to where we are in a country where the economy is going down, where crime is going up. We can't keep doing those same things and expect the conditions to improve. For too long and for too often we have accepted that St. Vincent and the Grenadines cannot lead in the right areas. We seem to accept that we will not measure up to our Caribbean neighbors in economic growth and in other areas, only in the bad things: rape, homicide, violence. Let us turn that around so that St. Vincent and the Grenadines can be a shining light in the Caribbean and in the world. We are small. We are small. That doesn't make us weak. We are precious. And we must act as if we believe that we have a place in this world and we have a contribution to make to humanity. Lift our game. I believe we can do it, and I want you and the rest of our people to believe it so. And as I said at the outset, to work together to get it done. Development and improvement are not automatic. They require conscious and persistent effort by all of us. You, our diaspora, are playing a vital role to make things better in SVG. I urge you to do more. We need you. I don't just mean that you must send home more money or more barrels to your loved ones or to your favorite charities. That plays an important part. But I am urging you to look for other ways to contribute to our development. Seek out investment opportunities for yourselves or with other partners to come and create businesses in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This will help us to create jobs, especially for our young people. We intend, as a New Democratic Party government, to make this easier by creating a ministry of the private sector to facilitate and encourage such investments. I ask you, help our farmers to find markets, and when they find markets for their produce, help them to get it here reliably and profitably. We all have our part to play. The good thing about St. Vincent is we are a small country. We get it right, we can turn it around very quickly. This gives me hope. What gives me hope too is seeing that tonight, when you could be doing other things, this room is full. It tells me that you care about what's happening in St. Vincent. I leave that to you to find out, Jeffrey. But this is it's serious business. We all have our role to play. And if we live by the creed of one nation, one people, one Vinci, we cannot fail. I use the analogy from time to time of the canoe because it's part of our heritage. That if you have 10 rowers on one side and 10 on the other, and they are rowing in opposite directions, the canoe will go around in circles. We've been going around in circles too long in St. Vincent. Let us all row in the same direction. We have our differences politically. When we have elections, let's put them aside and work to go forward. Defend our country, build our country. We need you in the diaspora. Thank you very much, and God bless you.